All right. Good day to everyone. Welcome to Malts with Mates. I'm some whiskey bloke, and today I have a really special guest with Andy Watts, the whiskey maker himself, head of intrinsic whiskey excellence at Distill. Andy, mate, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Marcus. It's great to join you, and thanks for asking me to be on board.
Thank you for coming on board. You know, it's not, I love everyone we've had on board, but yourself, you're such a huge pillar of the community around the world. It was great to hear from you. Now, the most important question, we want to get this out of the way. What are you drinking today?
Well, I thought because you kind of let it, I've put myself a little Baines into a glass early in the evening here, so it's a nice way to start it.
No, it's a fantastic way to start it. I do have a confession. I had a bottle of Baines, and then I drank it, and I couldn't get another one. So I'm afraid I'm not drinking Baines today, but I am drinking a single grain. At least there's that. I was going to say, maybe can we work out?
Give me a glass, I'll pour it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that works. Sure, I've got some Baines in here now. So you've got a super interesting story from England to South Africa. First a cricketer, then a master distiller. Can you tell us your story and where you came from?
Sure, I think it's pretty well documented, Marcus. But it is an interesting story, and you know I'm so grateful. I'm so blessed. I was in the right place at the right time on so many occasions, because it's not the normal route to becoming a master distiller. I grew up in the north of England in a small town called Penistone in the early 1960s, and England had just won the World Cup for the first time and the only time. And like every school kid at that stage, I wanted to be a professional footballer. So my whole school career was really, the only focus was on sport and wanting to be this professional footballer. I even stayed on to take A levels so that I could continue playing school soccer a little bit longer to try and get that breakthrough. But it never came at soccer. But I was pretty good at cricket too. And when I left school, I managed to pick up a contract with Derbyshire County Cricket Club. And I started playing with them in 1978. Predominantly my career with them in the second 11, because they had a phenomenal first 11 back then. I mean, it was a little bit different now. All the test players used to play full-on county cricket, and even club cricket when the counties weren't playing. So you might not remember them, but guys like Mike Hendrick, Barry Wood, Bob Taylor, Jeff Miller, these were all guys. Peter Kirsten, John Wright. These were all people who were playing for Derbyshire back then. So I was playing there, and then in 1982, I kind of wanted to find somewhere to go to in the winter, to escape the cold English winters. I'd been in the previous winters working at a girlfriend's father's wood factory, and just basically laboring away. And Peter Kirsten asked me, would I be interested in coming to South Africa? So I said, yeah, of course I would, because it'd be great. So in 1982, September, I finished up in this little place called Wellington in the Cape. Very much a small country town in the middle of the winelands, Afrikaans speaking back then, very little English spoken. But I had a fantastic time, but I thought it was just going to be 6 months, and then I'd come back and my life would carry on with cricket. But at the end of the 6 months, the club said, would I be interested in coming back next winter, next English winter, next South African summer? So I said yes, and for 3 years I did that. I did 6 months in the UK and 6 months in South Africa. And then in 1984, which was the third year to South Africa, I actually got released at the end of that season, the summer season in the UK. I got released from my contract with Derbyshire, and I kind of came to South Africa then, knowing that at the end of that 6 months, I didn't have a position back in the UK. And in the previous couple of years in South Africa, in those part-time, in those 6-month periods, I got involved with a wine company called Stellenbosch Farmers Winery. And really, it was a case of, the club couldn't afford let's say, the total package I was looking for. So they asked me, would I be prepared to do some part-time work in the mornings? And really, all I was doing was planning my coaching for the schools in the afternoon, and then leaving at lunchtime and going away and doing my coaching. But I took a little bit of an interest in what was going on, and I was in the spirit blending cellar at one of our sites called Moni's in Paarl, which is very close to Wellington. And on that third year when I was back there, a few things started to happen. There was a couple of guys, for varying reasons, got fired by the business. And the person who was actually heading up the spirit blending cellar, who become a very good friend of mine over the previous 2 summer visits, he got promoted to bottling manager. And he just said to me, but would I be interested in working full-time in the blending cellar? And I knew I didn't have anywhere to go back to. So I said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And it was just then in, October 1984, I signed permanently with Stellenbosch Farmers Winery, who is now Distell. So, we're almost 36 years into this career now. And I went back to the UK in March 1985 just to pack up everything I had and come back to South Africa full time. So that was the move. And then when I got back here, we were blending whiskies back then. We just had the one whiskey called 3 Ships Select, and it was South African grain whiskey with Scottish malt. And we were doing business with a company called Morrison Bowmore Distillers. We were buying bulk malt from them, and their directors used to come to South Africa each summer or each year, and basically have a social visit and sign the contract for the coming year. And this one time, I was actually asked, would I like to come to the braai, the barbecue, the evening? And I still really don't know why. I think it probably was because, I could speak English and I could understand the Scotch. So off I went to this function, and I got talking to the guys from Scotland. And as the wine flowed and the evening progressed, they came up with this crazy idea about, would I like to come back to Scotland and learn how to make whiskey? Which, I thought the next morning when I woke up with a headache, like most of us did, I thought, oh no, they will have forgotten about that crazy suggestion. And later that day, my boss, a guy called Jack Haynes, who was the big boss at Moni's in Paarl, he called me into his office and said, listen, we've got this idea. We'd like to send you back to Scotland for periods of time to learn how to make whiskey. And would you like to go? So I said, yeah, of course I would. So between 1985 and 1989, I spent various periods of time each year with Morrison's at their 3 distilleries, Glengarry in the Highlands, Auchentoshan just outside Glasgow, a lowland distillery, and then on the iconic island of Islay at Bowmore, where Jim McEwen was the manager at that stage. And as I said, I did that between 1985 and 1989 when Brian actually sold Morrison's then to Suntory. And my trips then stopped to Scotland. I came back to South Africa after that last visit in 89. And the company said to me, okay, you should know how to make whiskey now. And we'd like you to improve the quality of South African whiskey and produce a bit more of it for us. So I spent basically 2 years with our technical services department, closing down a small little experimental distillery we had in Stellenbosch called the R&B Distillery, moving those operations across to the James Sedgewick Distillery, which was in Wellington. It was previously to that, this was a brandy distillery, because we are in the winelands, and South Africa is very, very well known for world-class brandies. But the business did have other brandy distilleries, so we said, okay, we'll turn the James Sedgewick Distillery into the whiskey distillery. And in 1991, I was appointed manager of the distillery, and yeah, I managed the distillery for 25 years up until 2016, when I took on this new position in the company, which is head of whiskey intrinsic excellence. Which really, what it means is that for over 30 years of my career with Distell, I had people reporting to me and managing processes and people and equipment. Where now all I have reporting to me is actually whiskey. So it's quite a big difference from one day you're managing a distillery and everything which goes on in that distillery, and the next day all you're managing is the stock which is in the maturation warehouses, which doesn't talk back to you, doesn't go on strike, doesn't break down. So yeah, quite an interesting way of getting there. What really was interesting as well, and this is how I see kind of things falling into place, was, I mean, I'd lived in the UK for 22 years before I first visited, South Africa. In those 22 years, I'd never been to Scotland. Penistone, where the village I stayed in is less than 250 miles from Glasgow, but I'd actually never been into Scotland. It took me having to come 12,000 kilometers or 9,000 kilometers to South Africa for somebody to say, would I like to go back to Scotland? So, there's quite a lot of really crazy things which happened in that period of time. The time spent in Scotland, phenomenal. The people I worked with back then, they were so open. They shared everything. It was actually magical. And when I came back, it was a little bit difficult in the beginning. You don't have a distillery in every town here in South Africa. We're actually the only commercial whiskey distillery on the continent, which is 54 countries. There's nobody else producing whiskey on a commercial basis. We've got one or two craft distillers now, which is fantastic. But I mean, our distillery now is at the size where we have 150,000 casks in maturation at any one time, and our whiskies are available in every shop in every town throughout the country. So it's come quite a long way in that period of time.
No, it definitely has. Sorry, I've got an echo there. Not sure where that's coming from.
I can't hear it.
Oh, easy done. It is a really interesting story, and a lot of the people in the chat are saying that they've heard it multiple times, but it is one of the most interesting stories in whiskey they've ever heard, because it really is, and you are a fantastic storyteller. Multi-Mission actually came up with a great question just earlier, asking, does South Africa have any tradition in whiskey before James Sedgewick? I know you said you had a tradition in brandy. Was there any whiskey before then, aside from the 3 ships?
Whiskey first started in South Africa in the late 1800s with a guy called Nel Marpius, who started making alcohol from grain up in the north in Pretoria. But that didn't last long because the Anglo-Boer War started, so there was a prohibition then on alcohol, which stopped. There was other attempts during the early 1900s, mid 1900s, where people wanted to try and make whiskey, but at that stage the government was very biased towards brandy and wine, so the tax structuring was very different, which made it actually very, very difficult to make whiskey back then at anything resembling a profit. And also there wasn't a culture of whiskey in South Africa at that stage. It really was wine and brandy. What started to change that was Stellenbosch Farmers Winery, for some or other reason, in 1977 decided to launch a commercial whiskey. And at that stage, it wasn't actually a whiskey, it was an admix. It was a blend of Scottish malt whiskey and South African grain spirit. But in 1980, when our grains had been matured for 3 years, we could actually then launch it under the 3 Ships whiskey label, and not just 3 Ships as it was for the initial 3 years. And since then, I mean, the company's been amazing. They've stuck by everything we've tried to do, even with the change of the company structure when the merger took place in 2000. And they've always believed that there was a place for whiskey in South Africa long before the tsunami actually hit South Africa, which was mid 1990s when the country came a part of the global village again, and a lot of the whiskey started returning to South Africa, which had avoided the country through the apartheid years. And whiskey, if somebody had told me back then that whiskey would outsell brandy one day in South Africa, I would have said, what are you smoking? There's no ways. Brandy at that stage was probably selling 35 to 40 million liters a year. Whiskey maybe 1 or 2 million. Whiskey is now approaching 40 million liters a year, and brandy is around about 32 million. So, the roles have changed. The most popular spirit in South Africa now is whiskey. So, kudos to the company. They had fantastic vision to stick by it. But no, before 1977 and the launch of 3 ships, there wasn't really a South African commercial whiskey market in the country.
That's fantastic. And I guess as well, you probably know this from your time with the Stellenbosch, but what the vines that South Africa use for the wine production, is that a European vine, is that an African vine, or is that a South African vine?
Well, most of the cultivars for wine in South Africa are worldwide cultivars. We do have our own Pinotage, which I've done some work with some red wine casks from Pinotage. That was a South African grape varietal. But yeah, I mean, Sauvignon Blanc is known throughout the world. Chardonnay is known throughout the world. So a lot of our rootstock is imported into South Africa from the traditional winemaking countries.
That's really interesting. And I have to wonder, was South Africa affected during the late 1800s with the phylloxera blight that hit Europe? Did that make its way down at all?
To be honest, I couldn't actually tell you, but I don't think it would have got this far. No. And to be honest, back then as well, it wasn't I wouldn't say it was really a commercial a commercial wine industry. Even up until the mid 1990s, it was pretty much government controlled. So, you would have farmers working for cooperatives, and they would deliver their grapes there, and then the wine would basically come back to the members of the farmers themselves after it had been processed, and a little bit put on to sale. But the consumption, it's only probably since '94, and the population with disposable income has increased incredibly, which means that the kind of liquor industry in South Africa has really boomed in the last 25, 30 years.
Excellent. And I mean, as well as that exploding, we spoke about this earlier, but Bain's whiskey has exploded onto the whiskey market. Can you tell us a little bit about Bain's, about what you're drinking today?
Yeah, it was again, late 1990s. Whiskey starting to get a hold into the South African market. The emerging black middle class were fascinated by whiskey. It's seen as an aspirational drink. If you're drinking whiskey, you've arrived. The big brands came to South Africa. They made it very fashionable, very, it was the cool thing, the in thing to drink whiskey. And 2 of them, which became very big very quickly in South Africa, was one from America and one from Ireland, and both began with the letter J. And, I was kind of late 1990s, and I was looking at these 2 whiskies and thinking, but, what makes them so popular? Why are they being consumed, in such great quantities so quickly in South Africa? And, I kind of looked at Irish whiskies, and this is my personal opinion now. And, Irish whiskies to me are super soft, they're smooth, they're very easy to drink. But, after 1 or 2, I kind of, I lose interest. There's not a lot of complexity there. And I think that's why they're so popular, is because they are such approachable and easy drinking whiskeys. And then I looked at, the bourbon industry from America and the whiskeys which were coming across. And I thought, what makes these so appealing? And they've got this, to me, a lot of sweetness, a lot of spicy toffee, vanilla notes coming through, which if you think of traditional Scottish whiskies, they don't. Scotland loses a little bit more, peat for flavor. It's only the last, 20 years or so that they even started with, using different casks. So back then it was pretty much the stock standard blends which were coming to South Africa. So Irish whiskies a little bit easier on the palate, so they became popular because remember you now had a population which hadn't drank whiskey before. They were drinking whiskey because it was the thing to do, but obviously they were starting to like it. Where possibly, if the only whiskey they'd had in front of them had been an Islay powerful peaty malt, then whiskey might not have been so popular. So there was this option to now drink this fashionable Irish whiskies, and wow, they are actually quite nice and they mix well. And then you got the American bourbons, which were soft, sweet, spicy, toffee notes. And I kind of thought, well, how could I get the best of both worlds? How can I create something which is soft and smooth, but also got these sweet, spicy toffee notes? And that's where I came up with the idea of, why not use a grain spirit? Now, as we all know, most grain is distilled to become the filler in blends. So, you produce your grain spirit and you put it into an old cask and it sits in the warehouse. As soon as it's done its 3 years, then it's available to go into the blends. Where with Baines, we specifically from day one had this vision of trying to create something which would be a product on its own. In the time when, even before grain whiskey was, being consumed as a product, it really was just for the blends. So what we did was we distilled the grain whiskey or the grain spirit, and went to the States with our cooperage manager, and we selected some first fill ex bourbon casks. In other words, a cask which has just been used for bourbon once, which it can only be used for bourbon once. And when that cask had been dumped, instead of it going into the the Canadian industry or the Scottish industry, I took it straight to South Africa, and I put my grain spirit in there. And we left it for 3 years, which is the minimum maturation period for the spirit to become whiskey here in South Africa. And after 3 years, I was kind of expecting my eureka moment. And when we took the whiskey out, it was good, but it wasn't, it didn't have that wow factor. And we've got a warm climate here, so you get a lot of extraction each year, but you're also losing 4.5% to 5% per year to the Angels share. So, what were my options after 3 years? To leave it in that same cask, 1, 2, 3. We all know the extraction is the most in the first year, slightly less, slightly less. So to leave it in the same cask, I wasn't going to get any more of the extraction of those spicy flavors which I wanted. So we took the really unusual decision of going back to the States and buying a second set of first fill ex bourbon casks. So after 3 years, instead of looking to put that whiskey then into a bottle, we put it back into another set of casks. So now you've gone 1, 2, 3, new set of casks. You start in that extraction process with a fresh cask again in a warm climate. And after 2 years, we thought, well, we've got the product which we're looking for. So, we launched in 2009. So it was actually a 10-year period of concept to birth of the product. So when Baines did arrive on the scene in July 2009, lots of people, really do believe whiskey's on tap. It isn't, as we all know. You've got to be thinking way into the future. We'd actually been working on it for 10 years, and we were ready to launch in 2005, 2006, but the business wasn't. So what I did then as well was, instead of stopping production on Baines, we actually continued production on Baines, and I took some of those whiskies which would have been 5 years old in 2004, 2005, because we started late 99. I took some of those and I started playing around with innovation and putting them back into wood and seeing, how would they age even further. And yeah, a few of those trials have been very successful, and we have a few, travel retail exclusives which have come out of those few years when the company didn't launch, and we continued to look to play around with the normal Baines whilst we were waiting for the business to say okay. And yeah, we've been on the market now, 2009, so it's 11 years. An incredibly approachable drink in terms of it really did what we wanted it to do. We created something which was soft and smooth, easy to drink, sweet and spicy. So you were looking at, the younger palate, the palate which wasn't, let's say, probably used to whiskies or even spirits, coming off the, the alcopops, the RTDs, the beers, the ciders. but looking to move into a whiskey environment, then Baines was kind of a nice entry product to get them in there. I wouldn't call it an entry level whiskey because it's a very interesting whiskey for an experienced palate, for somebody to actually see what you can achieve with grain whiskey if your cask program is right, if the way you've handled it through the whole process of creating that spirit in the first place. We put a lot of attention into our fermentations to make sure that we've got exactly the right wash to take to the stills. So yeah, in those 11 years, incredibly successful at international competitions. I know a lot of people don't put too much weight onto awards, but it is nice to know that these aren't awards which we're giving ourselves. These are awards which are coming from people probably not even South Africans on those tasting panels. And yeah, the World Whiskey Awards twice, the world's best grain whiskey in that short period of time. So yeah, it ticks all the boxes. It's the product. I've got specifically a very soft spot for it, having kind of come up with the idea and been with it through its whole entire journey. And yeah, it would be great to see it continue the growth pattern it's actually showing now. It would be fantastic.
No, it's amazing, and I do think I speak for everyone when I say it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's got that approachability for a new drinker, and it's got the complexity that you're talking about for an experienced drinker. They can drink it and they can learn more from it. And speaking of awards as well, I did find something just from about 4 days ago. Your Baines Cape Mountain Whiskey Trio, which I believe was that travel retail, have just taken silver, gold, and double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. So
Yeah.
and you must be incredibly bloody proud that all your children are being recognized around the world. Is just stunning.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned earlier, I'm incredibly blessed. I think the nice thing is we've got an amazing team here at the distillery. It's a small distillery in terms of world terms. You will visit much bigger distilleries. What makes it pretty unusual is it is one of those few distilleries which which produces malt whiskey and grain whiskey on the same premises. But the team here at the distillery, so passionate about what they do. They've allowed me the opportunity to travel the world and to be able to talk about the whiskey and to meet people like yourselves and kind of create relationships and I always like to say that whiskey it isn't a commodity for me. It's not soap or toothpaste or shampoo. It's living, it's breathing, it's got a story. Every whiskey has a story behind it, and I think if you can tell that story and the whiskey backs up the story in terms of ticking the boxes for the taste profile of it, then I've got a team to thank for being able to run the distillery and continue everything while I've been the last 10 years or so helping to our marketing teams to try and get this product into more and more bottle stores and shops and households around the world.
No, and I mean, as you say, everyone's got a story, but it does help that your distillery, your whiskey, and you have some of the more interesting stories, and you yourself are such a good storyteller. I guess moving away from the whiskey and the distillery right now, what do you do when you're not working? What do you get up to?
Well, I mean, having been a professional sportsman, sport still plays a big part in my life. And when I stopped playing cricket, I stopped playing actually I played provincial cricket here in South Africa, but I stopped at a relatively young age, 32, for the simple reason, myself and my wife, our twins were born. And, I kind of didn't think it was fair for me to be going off and playing cricket and having the whole day away when my wife had had these two little terrors at that stage to look after. So I stopped cricket in 1992, and I started doing a bit of road running back then, and I did that for 10 years and actually loved it. Finished up 2002 was the last year I ran. And I did the London Marathon that year. I ran it for one of my daughter's friends who was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. So I ran the London Marathon that year in what I think was a really respectable 3 hours 37 minutes. I've done a couple of the big South African ultra marathons, and I was loving it. And then I had a freak injury in a training session one morning and lost the cartilage in one of my knees, which didn't allow me to pound the roads as much as I've been doing. So I started cycling in 2002. So now my passion is every spare moment I get, fortunately living in a town like Wellington and staying on the distillery. I'm 10 minutes and I'm into the mountains around here. So I do a lot of mountain bike, more than road. Road cycling is pretty dangerous out here. So mountain biking, as long as you don't fall and break a neck or something, it's pretty good. So yeah, that's where I spend most of my time now, my spare time. My wife works full time as well. On a Saturday when she finishes work, she works in a bank. Then we'll normally find one of our wine farms. Wellington, apart from having this amazing whiskey distillery here, also sits with about 15 wine estates. So there's always one where you can go and have a bottle of wine on a Saturday afternoon while you're watching the sun go down. Our kids are growing up now, so my daughter lives. She's married in Pretoria, which is a 2-hour flight from Cape Town. And my son actually coaches cricket in the UK, and he lost his work this year because of COVID. He actually arrived in UK on the Monday morning and flew back out on the Thursday because Harrow, the school which he coaches, it was closed down. So yeah, if there's anybody out there who's got who's looking for a young guy to come and labour for them or do something for them for 6 months until he can get back to the UK again, then my son's available. So sport still plays a big role in my off time. Yeah.
No, it's awesome to hear that. I guess as well as a weird question, would you ever consider trying to make like a whiskey cricket league, like distilleries from around the world have cricket teams and you all compete in a very drunken test match with that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of my travels over the last few years has been to America, to Canada, to Germany, and those are countries which don't really play cricket. So my story doesn't mean too much when I tell it to those guys. It means a lot more to an Australian or a guy from the UK. But yeah, it's. I played actually. I played cricket with an old man's team, what we call the Golden Oldie team, up until just a couple of years ago, and that was an amazing 15 years I had with those guys, because it's basically businessmen, and they tour a different continent every 2 years. And the great thing about it is it was partners were always welcomed with the trip. It wasn't about guys going off on a boozy cricket tour. It was all about partners coming with and having this amazing time. And yeah, I was fortunate with this Golden Oldie team over the last 15 years to visit some places I never thought I would do playing cricket. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Someone's just commented, actually, Isnay Winston has just commented that if you started the distillery cricket team, you could burn some corks for the ashes. Which I think is actually pretty good. And then again, sports, and this is going to be really relevant to you as a born Englishman, now South African. Last year, Rugby World Cup 2019, and I'm going to lose half of the viewers when I ask this because they're all English. I loved South Africa through the Rugby World Cup. It was fantastic. Were you feeling conflicted during the final match at all, or?
No, my blood is green. I've been a South African now for 36, 37 years. Far outweighs my English time. So, unfortunately, apart from having a still a little bit of a love for English soccer, the rest of the sports, because we don't really play. Well, we play soccer. South Africa is passionate about soccer. We just, don't. We're not too good at it. So I still got a little bit of a soft spot for English soccer, but for all the other sports, my blood is a very strong South African green.
Don't worry. My partner's mentioned to me more than once if I would consider backing Scotland or England in the rugby. And I'm Australian through and through. I'm not. There is no way in hell I'm gonna go for anyone aside from Australia. I was saying the entire time I would love for Australia to win the World Cup. I didn't think we were going to. We've not had a good team for the past decade or so, and my next bet was South Africa and then Wales, because you've got to love watching the Welsh play rugby. They've got a love for it, but I think South Africa went into that World Cup with the mindset of we're winning it, it's coming back home, and I loved every moment watching you guys play.
Yeah, it was early morning here in South Africa, so we were having, it was like breakfast drams to watch the rugby. It was finished up in a very long day, but at least it was a good day.
I was in, I think there was a whiskey festival in the Netherlands the night before. So I had finished that and I was on my way to the train station. I had booked a late train because I wanted to watch it, and I found this cafe that had a TV, and I asked them if they could turn it over, and they switched it over, and I got myself a pint because it's Netherlands, so of course cafes serve pints. And I would think I was the only person there watching the rugby, and occasionally when the chefs would wander out and say, "What sport is this?" I have to, it's rugby. This is the World Cup. How do you not know? And it's going, "Oh, yeah, go that guy."
Well, tomorrow is tomorrow is quite a big day here in South Africa. It's 25 years to the day tomorrow that we won the World Cup back in 1995. So tomorrow, as soon as the TV starts tomorrow morning, it's going to be a full day of build up to. They're going to show the game live at 6 o'clock again tomorrow evening, or the game is going to be shown again at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening.
You've won the World Cup 3 times now. You won it last year. You won it in '95. And when 2007. 2007. I can't do math. Yeah, and as we know, New Zealand's also won it 3 times. Australia's won it twice. England's only won it once, and no one else has won it. So the viewership is now gone. By the way, no one's. But no, you got to love sports, and it's great to see. I guess moving back on a whiskey now as well, just for a moment, I had a thought. Are there any other whiskey brands coming out, or whiskey distilleries starting in South Africa?
Yeah, the last few years, there's been a big boom in gin, and I think a lot of these gin producers are wanting to produce whiskey as well. So gin is obviously the route to take for the first 3 years because it gives you a little bit of a cash flow. So I'm expecting to see more and more local craft whiskies hit the market in the next few years. There are one or two who I would say are maybe just slightly above craft in terms of, a small amount of volume which has been sold around the country. But I do not honestly believe that you will ever see an operation like Distell have built up with the James Sedgewick Distillery. I don't believe that the people will be able to invest the money which this company has put behind what we've tried to achieve here.
Well, I think people see what James Sedgewick has done, what Distiller's done, the whiskey it puts out, which is fascinating. Gascoigne, Nick has just asked, are there any whiskey distilleries outside of South Africa? I know of one in Rwanda, and that's the only one I know, but maybe you might be able to tell
Yeah, I think
Gascoigne, Nick.
when you move out of South Africa, the legislation for making whiskey is almost to the point, to the letter, the same as what it is in Scotland. So it's three basic ingredients: water, grains, and yeast. Must be matured for a minimum of 3 years in wooden casks, oak casks in Scotland. We state wooden casks. Your malt whiskey must come from malted barley, must be distilled in copper pot stills. The strength of your grain spirit, maximum 94.8 off the still. We choose 94.3. So our legislation is almost to the word the same as it is in Scotland. The problem once you move outside of South Africa into the rest of Africa is that unfortunately anything goes. So you can put whiskey on anything. A lot of the legislations in those countries are non-existent. A lot of the legislations allow you, to use molasses-based spirit, like India, for example, do, and call that whiskey as well. There are no minimum maturation periods, so it could be just straight off spirit with coloring added. So in terms of whiskey produced, like, for example, if you use Paul John or Amrut as an example from India, whiskey which is produced the traditional way, I cannot think of another one in Africa. As I say, there are a few in South Africa now which are slowly starting to make whiskey. And one or two of them, creating very, very acceptable spirits. And listen, let's be honest about this. When I first started making whiskey for Distell back in 1991, if anybody else in the business had known anything about making whiskey, I would have been fired within the first 2 years. I was really the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. I couldn't phone a friend. Back then, there was no phones like we have now. You had to actually book a call to the UK through the local central central office at the post office. So I was pretty much on my own. And even though I'd learned how to make whiskey with some of the legends of the Scottish industry, coming back to South Africa, things like the climate, nobody, expected people to want to make whiskey in this, hot country. And, I learned the hard way. In the beginning, I struggled with fermentations. So much so that, in the end, I worked very closely with a yeast company, and we developed special strains of yeast. And we know what temperatures those yeasts enjoy, and so we temperature control our fermentations now. So all of what we've learned, these craft distillers are going to learn as well. There isn't a plug and play for making whiskey. It's not about, okay, I'm going to start tomorrow and it's going to be fine. There's little fine details, the 5 stages of milling, mashing, fermentation, distillation, maturation. As I mentioned, the fermentation, I learned very early in my career that you cannot distill a good spirit from a bad fermentation. So if you don't get the fermentation right, forget it. You're not going to make a good spirit. But you can distill a bad spirit from a good fermentation. So even if you get the fermentation right, it doesn't stop there. You've then got to distill it correctly. And I mean, I worked with a guy who's become a very, very good friend of mine, and he's a local chemical engineer who's basically every project I've worked on in terms of equipment design, upgrades, he's worked with me. And, we designed the still together using a computer program, called Aspen, where you know exactly at what temperature certain congeners boil, certain alcohols boil, and do you want to keep those in your product or do you want to take them out? And that's the advantage of a column distillation. It's a continuous process. So you are continually taking off the heads and the tails, which, for example, in the pot distillation, you do as a batch. So, by identifying what were positive flavors to what I wanted in the spirit, negative flavors, and all that has come, over these last 36 years. So I reckon, South Africans are very uh, ingenuitive. We fly by the seats of our pants. We know how to survive. We, we can make a plan. And I'm absolutely positive that some of these craft distillers, they're not going to give up the first time when they don't get it right. They're going to do it again, and they're going to do it again. And I've got no reason to think that they can't be incredibly successful at, somewhere down the line. But yeah, they're going to have to. Hopefully, they learn a little bit quicker than what I did. But there is more people, and the world is a much more open place now. I mean, I get lots of people contacting me now, just through Twitter or through, social media, and just saying, listen, I'm starting to do this, and this is what I'm doing. Where am I going wrong? And I'm not I'm not a personal coach for these guys, but even by listening to them, the enthusiasm's there. But there are certain very, very basic, simple things which they've got to get a grasp on before they're going to make successful spirit. But listen, that's half the fun of it, eh? It's actually, at the end of the day, it's making that whiskey and seeing how it comes over a period of time, and you actually taste what you envisage right in the beginning. It's what makes it such a challenging but yet such a rewarding and fulfilling work.
Oh yeah. If everyone could distill perfect whiskey the first time, we wouldn't have stories like yours that are so fascinating.
Yeah.
And just talking about whiskey as well, Richard from Mick Whisky has actually just asked his own question of, is there such a thing as South African oak for making casks? And I think we've spoken about this before, but
yeah, our climate in South Africa is harsh. So a lot of European oak was brought across to South Africa, and to be honest, it grows too quickly. The trees grow very, very quickly here in South Africa, so they're very porous, which means they are not good for making casks from. They don't have a tight grain, and they grow far too quickly. The only successful trees here are actually the gum trees from Australia, which were brought in for the mining industry way back. They've basically taken over the country, those things. But yeah, I wouldn't like to think I was making a whiskey cask out of one of those trees. So no, I'm looking around. I've my cooperage manager is. We're always looking for something which might work. But a lot of things as well is, it's not just about getting a tree and making a cask from it. A lot of the resins inside those trees, some of them are quite poisonous. So you've really got to be sure that everything's right about the wood and that interaction between the spirit, the wood, the atmosphere, which at the end of the day is not going to give you something in a bottle which is not going to be pleasant or healthy. So yeah, at this stage now, there's no local trees which we're making casks from, but that would be nice if we could at some stage find something which was suitable.
that's really interesting. I did hear, by the way, someone told me a story about some guys in Tasmania who had experimented with maturing whiskey in gum tree casks. I didn't hear how it went, but I imagine that they smelt it and said, that's definitely poisonous. That will definitely kill you if you drink it, because that's got. I mean, I'd love to hear if anyone. I'm talking to some Australian guys later, and I'm going to pose a question to them. But I don't think that would be safe to drink. I think you honestly would be at high risk, because that's not healthy. We can't digest that.
Yeah, I think it's it's all about their interaction as well. Remember, I mean, it's the whole idea of where flavor comes from in the whiskey. I mean, yes, you can do so much through fermentations, different yeasts, distillation techniques, but still a lot of the flavor for whiskey comes from the casks which you mature that spirit in. So it's you've got to be pretty sure about the type of wood you're pouring that expensive spirit into, hoping that you've got a good chance of it being a success at the end of the period. So yeah, I think we will continue to do trials and look for things, but at this stage we're not off the beaten track in terms of this type of wood. We're looking more at different types of casks, what those casks have been used for previously, and can that help us to create new, innovative, exciting things for the whiskey public?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to give us any hints as to what types of casks you're looking at, or is that a need-to-know basis?
No, well, listen, we've done it. I mean, with the three Baines travel retail exclusives you just mentioned, that was my three favorite sherries is Oloroso, PX, Pedro Jimenez, and Fino. So I did trials with those, which were very successful. On the Three Ships range of whiskies, which I'm also responsible for, we've got what we call the Masters Collection, which is a range of whiskies I started in 2015, which is each year our commitment to really the South African whiskey consumer to produce something which is limited and unusual and, if possible, not been done before in South Africa. So there we've used, again, Oloroso, Fino, PX. In 2016, I created a whiskey using, it was a blend, South African blend of malt and grain whiskies, which I finished in those Pinotage wine casks, the red wine casks. It really was at that stage the ultimate South African whiskey dream, a South African, whiskey which had been matured in the South African wine varietal cask. And yeah, I've got other wine experiments going on. So watch this space. This year could be a good year for some other expressions. And yeah, we've got trials, going on in the background as well. It's the thing is with South Africa, it's not always easy to convince the business that you want a container full of casks just for experimental purposes. We can't just kind of bring one or two casks back over from Europe on the back of a bakkie or something. It's pretty much a container load, and it's a heavy investment. But yeah, at this stage, there's more. One of the exciting parts about my work is actually the innovation side. And again, my commitment to the business is that the day I do retire, I will make sure that there's more than enough whiskey to allow my successor the time to work on their own style of what they want to do while there's still whiskey in the pipeline.
No, fantastic, and no doubt there'd be, you will leave big shoes to fill, but I'm sure you'd leave fantastic spirits to toy with as well. One question before we head into our quiz and anagram section, I just want to ask, who in the world and where in the world are you excited for regarding whiskey at this point in time? Any distilleries, any countries that you're really keen to follow?
Sure, that's a good question. Actually, it's a really good question. I'm quite excited about what's coming out of England. Again, nobody, really thought that it was the English's prerogative to make whiskey. So, I've tasted some very good whiskies from the English Whiskey Company. I think they're doing a great job at the lakes. I've always had a really soft spot for Mackmyra from Sweden. Again, I think they've done some amazing work. Probably one of the first, let's say, distilleries outside of Scotland which started to get some world attention. So I've been to, last year I was fortunate enough to visit Taiwan and Kavalan, where Ian Chang, my good friend, was at that stage. Some amazing stuff coming out of there in the warm climate they've got. I mean, I've got a maturation loss of 4.5 to 5%. Those guys are 13 to 15% per annum. So it's each country has its own challenges. So I think world whiskey is the excitement for me at the moment, to see that it is, and to see how the consumer now is. One of my biggest challenges in South Africa is not making world-class whiskey. As I mentioned earlier, we've got an amazing team here at the distillery. The world are rating our whiskies in competitions. One of the biggest challenges we've got here is changing perception. Because South Africa is such a young whiskey country, we're consuming a lot of whiskey, but we're not really educated in whiskey. So I think we have a lot of work to do here to try and, you speak whiskey in South Africa and the consumer thinks Scotch, where I think the rest of the world's consumer has kind of moved on a bit now. And yes, Scotland is there. It's an amazing place. It's alongside Ireland, the home of whiskey. But the consumer is prepared to step outside a comfort zone. Where here in South Africa, our big challenge is actually to get South Africans believing that South Africa can make world-class whiskey. The rest of the world is telling us, yes, you do, and we're having this conversation, and I've had it with other people. But in South Africa, it's still pretty much the big brands, Scottish, Irish, and America, which kind of dominates the sales and the bars and everything. So, I would like to see, I'd like to see our own country slowly change and start accepting world whiskies like the rest of the world seems to have done. So yeah, world whiskey probably the exciting part for me at the moment, and those few distilleries I've mentioned.
No, fantastic. I can only agree with you on the countries you said as well. I'm loving the stuff from Taiwan, Sweden, England. It's all amazing. So heading into our questions round, I spoke with you weeks ago about this, and you mentioned you're a David Bowie fan. So I am not a David Bowie fan. For those who don't notice, I'm young, and I have poor taste in music, so I don't listen to David Bowie. I've been told I should. But I contacted Still Surreal. Mick from Still Surreal was kind enough to give me 6 questions about David Bowie that I'm going to ask Andy. So if they're too easy or too hard, blame Mick. If they're brilliant, thank Mick. But I hope you enjoy them. So first question for you. How many members were in David Bowie's band Tin Machine?
Oh my word. Mick, that's real follower stuff. Absolutely no idea. 3.
You one off. Apparently it's 4.
Is it 4? Yeah, drummer, bass, tenor, and Bowie as the singer. Yeah, 4. I could have had a more educated guess there.
Okay. Who featured with David Bowie on the front of his 7th album, Pin-Ups?
I said I was a fan. I didn't say I was a... No, I'm going to... Who featured on... What was the album again?
Pin-Ups.
Pin-Ups. Who featured with David Bowie on the album cover of Pin-Ups? No.
Apparently it's Twiggy.
Twiggy. Oh, I was going to say Iggy Pop, but okay, Twiggy. Okay.
Well, I mean, that's an answer to one of these questions. Who did he tour with as backup vocalist and keyboardist in 1977?
What was he? Keyboard and vocalist in 1977.
Yeah, you've said this name.
Oh, Iggy Pop.
Yeah, Iggy Pop. Yeah, Iggy Pop.
Yeah. Yay!
I'm beginning to wonder if I should have asked Mick for these, and if I shouldn't have asked Rich or someone else.
Yeah, I thought it would be. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Come on, it's testing me now. Is that it?
All right. Uh, what was David Bowie's biggest selling album?
Yo, I would probably think um, because of his death, maybe Black Star.
Now, I would have said Black Star as well for the same reason. Apparently, it's Let's Dance.
Wow.
Now, if anyone in the comments believes that Mick is false and could give us numbers, that would be fantastic. Because I would definitely say I would have definitely said Black Star. That one I
Well,
knew because that was the big
yeah,
one.
Black Star topped the Billboard 200 charts in the USA, which I think was it's the only album he had which did that. So yeah, I would have gone for Black Star
I
just
am I'm
because.
I'm, I'm happy. I'm happy to give you the point and never look that
Yeah,
up.
yeah. I think my motivation behind it, it's got to hold for something. Maybe it's a bit
You've
new
explained
for
you've
maybe it's a bit
explained
new for
your
Mick.
your working. All your working is correct, so I think the answer has to be correct.
Okay, 2 out of 4,
All
or
right.
1.5 out of 4.
Now we give you two. Who did he sing Under Pressure with at the Freddie Mercury Memorial Concert?
He never sang Under Pressure live with Freddie Mercury. Um, Annie Lennox,
Yeah, Annie Lennox.
amazing. You must watch that on YouTube. Amazing.
I will give it a watch. I'll put that on the list. And the final question is, what year was he inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yo. Let's have a think. Hall of Fame 2012?
No, no, no. This is I'll give you a hint. It's within the decade of my birth. Um, it's
Oh,
within the decade of when you started working for Distell, I believe you said. Yeah.
wow. I didn't realize that. So 86?
10 years off, 1996.
96. Okay. Sure.
96. Yeah, yeah. Apparently. Fun fact, by the way, you mentioned 1991 earlier. Is when I think you said that's when you started. That's when you permanently moved to
No, that's when
Sedgewick.
I was appointed manager of the distillery was 91.
That's when you. Yeah. That is the year of my birth. Just to give you some. I'm not having a laugh. I was born in '91, mate.
Well, you've got a whole life in front of you, Marcus.
I mean, it's filled with a lot of whiskey and cigarettes, so I'm only happy. And also great music choices to listen to. But that was Andy's David Bowie quiz.
Wow, that was tough, eh? I didn't revise
That
for
was
that.
tough. That was tough. Congratulate. Thanks so much, Andy, for putting that quiz on because that was brilliant. Next time I might ask you to make it. Actually, Andy had to go for that. If anyone else says they're a musician fan, I'm still going to go back to Mick. Everyone has to have the same level of questions.
Yeah, I think Mix obviously is, he's more of a fan than I am. I've lost a bit of track there. Embarrassing,
Mick
but
is,
anyway.
I mean, by all means, I've spoken to Mick about music a few times before, and he's fantastic with his music. And he has a Spotify playlist which I'm currently listening all my way through because I've got a lot of time on my hands, as do we all nowadays. All right. So that is the question round. And after the question round, we do the very famous anagram round, which for today I have chosen whiskies that you should be familiar with. That's the big hint I'm giving you. These are all whiskies you should be familiar with. So, first of these whiskies is Sheep Shirt.
Three Ships.
Three Ships it is. Three Ships it is. I can't, that's the one thing I'm disappointed in. I can't think of actually ever had I don't think I've ever bought a bottle of Three Ships. I think I've bought a glass at a bar, but I don't think I've ever bought a bottle.
Yeah, it's Three Ships is primarily just sold in South Africa. We have a 750 ml bottle here, Marcus. That's the standard bottle size. Where Europe is a 700 ml bottle. So, we can't actually legally sell Three Ships into Europe. So we've had a little bit in Canada, but 99.9% of all Three Ships is consumed here in South Africa.
No, I mean, I'm well aware that you guys get a 750 ml bottle because I'm very jealous about that.
Yeah, and we've got a minimum alcohol of 43, eh?
You've got a minimum alcohol of 43. In Australia, you can buy Jim Beam at 37%. At least you used to be able to. It was a weird regulation where you could call it, I think you could call it a spirit, 37%, something like that. If I'm wrong, people will correct me, but I recall seeing bottles of whiskey, bottles of Jim Beam in a liquor store I used to work in that were 37%, and that has always bugged me. And now you guys have the stronger booze and you've got bigger bottles. It's just not fair.
Bigger bottles.
All right. Now, second anagram is banana bin, huh?
Bunnahabhain.
Bunnahabhain, yeah. That was the only anagram I could make from Bunnahabhain. It's got too many B's, too many vowels, too many H's. It's a great whiskey, though. I do love a bit of it.
No, it is. It's amazing. Yeah, some good stuff coming out of there now.
Yeah, I mean, they're part of the Distill portfolio. Do you ever get consulted on what's going to happen with Bunnahabhain or any of the other distilleries?
Yeah, when I took up the position in 2016 as head of whiskey, at that stage, the business thought of it including Scotland as well. To be honest, it was about 6 months when it was not necessary. They know exactly what they're doing. So my role really with Scotland at the moment is they'll send me samples of the whiskey, and I'll just enjoy them at my leisure while they carry on doing what they're exceptionally good at doing. So under the leadership of Stephen Woodcock and Andrew at Bunnahabhain and the team they've got there, they don't need me putting my nose.
That sounds fantastic. And no one who's, well, actually, I say that. I think maybe 2 people who are currently watching also have the same, where distilleries just send them samples to enjoy at their leisure. But one day, we'll all be at that level one day. Anyway, your third anagram is add tons.
Deanston.
Deanston it is, yeah. I imagine you've got the theme that I've gone for.
Well, you said I should know the whiskey, so it does help a lot, I must admit, Marcus. Yeah.
I thought it would have been unfair to give you a bunch of Australian distillery names. Because we're going to be here all day if we did that. I always try to go for a theme. Sometimes
Okay.
it doesn't work. Sometimes it works really well. The next one, no, Richard, the next one does not begin with a T. The next one is block tablet.
Black bottle.
Black bottle it is. Aye. Which, I gotta be honest, I quite like black bottle. I used to buy that in liter bottles in Australia. You know, beautiful stuff, especially once you drink a liter of it. You can't taste much else, so you don't give a damn what it tastes like.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's gone through a few blend changes in the last few years, but again, I think they've now found the sweet spot again with it. It's back to a stunning blended whiskey again, and you'll always find a bottle in my bar. Even before we took over Burn Stewart in 2014, it was still. Even before that, it was it was actually one of those blended whiskies. If you go into a bar in Scotland, you would always find it there. It would always be on Optic, and that's how I got to know, Black Bottle.
Well, I'll tell you what, I see black bottle so often in Belgium, in Antwerp, where I currently am. So many bars will have a bottle of black bottle. For the life of me, I can't figure out why. Not to say it's a poor whiskey, but I just think, why black bottle? Or the wide world of whiskey, black bottle.
Yeah.
I'm not angry. I'll happily order it. It's great whiskey, but yeah, it's just weird. All right, your last anagram. The final question is Jacked Me Swigs.
Wow. Swigs. Oh. Okay, clue.
Say again.
Clue.
You should be the most familiar with this. This is not a whiskey. This is a distillery. You pretty much live there.
Oh my word, James Sedgewick.
It's James Sedgewick.
I see it there. Yeah, I think you. Am I Sedgewick? Exactly. Yeah, you got it. And I do live here. It's my home is on the distillery for the last 28 years. So yeah.
I was gonna say, don't tell me I spelt it wrong, because that would have ruined the entire. It's always a great laugh to do that, and it's always. I think when I put this up on YouTube, I can edit that time down so you get it.
Get a little bit. Yeah, good idea there. Yeah. Hey, but it shows we're just human, eh?
Look, everyone's human, and we're just here to have a laugh, mate. Now, I guess the final question that I want to ask before we finish is, in what way can the whiskey community help support whiskey and distilleries at this time?
Yeah, listen, I mean, all of us, around the world, whether it's through our visitor centres, which are closing down, even the James Sedgwick Distillery here now, yes, we're back up producing. We're trying to limit the amount of people on the premises because the health and safety of our guys is paramount. So I would think if the ways you can help is possibly to go through, online sales directly with the distilleries themselves, because then, not taken away from the retailers, but at least then, the distillery gets a little bit bigger cut of what the cost of the bottle is, goes back into the business. And yeah, just look forward for that day when we can start visiting our distilleries again, and we can start going back into bars again. And yeah, if you're in somewhere in a village where your distillery is, then maybe look to support that distillery for a while, before moving back to, maybe your commercial brands, or which you normally buy. We've got a thing in South Africa where we say local is lekker. We'd like to think that when we start opening up sales again, people will look to support South African produce to help all of our, whether it's farmers or whether it's the liquor industry or whoever it is, to get back on their feet. I don't think anybody's coming out of this unscathed. I think the other thing is with the whiskey community out there as well is, and I always say to people when I do tastings that I personally don't believe that there is only one whiskey for every occasion. And if you're only drinking one whiskey, you're doing yourself a disservice. So, everybody who's coming into the whiskey market around the world, don't be afraid to, if it's only a sample bottle or two, to try that and just see what they're doing. Let's move out of our comfort zones and keep on trying and supporting the growth of whiskey through the world, because, I think that's, if there's one thing the last 20 years has shown us, is that, there are incredible spirits and whiskies which are coming out of the non-traditional whiskey countries. And whiskey's to me it's like a rainbow. Just when you think you're going to get to the end of the rainbow and you're going to collect that pot of gold, it's like just when you think you found that perfect whiskey, somebody offers you another one and it moves on. So, responsibly, whiskey can last you a lifetime of trial and fun, and I think also, keep together as groups like you're doing these initiatives you're having now. Get people talking about whiskey and the responsible use of whiskey, consumption of whiskey, and to learn about whiskey. There is so much about the product which makes it fascinating, not just the incredible taste in the bottle, how much goes into getting it into that bottle. And I think you guys are doing an amazing job for the industry by having platforms like this for people who are interested in whiskey to log into and to learn from, people like myself or other guests you will have on your show. And last weekend I was in Canada speaking to a group there as well. And the modern world has become a lot smaller, and whether or not we ever get back to the normality we knew before, I really don't know. So, maybe this sort of thing is going to play a bigger role in our future lives as ambassadors and producers. But it does allow us to get into this a close-up situation with people who are really, really interested and want to help us spread, the whiskey word around the world.
Oh, fantastic. And I couldn't agree with you more. Supporting small distilleries at this time is incredibly important, and supporting distilleries like yourselves through online sales, if we can, we should do it, because everyone who's watching this loves whiskey. So we want to have it after we come out of this, so support it now. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, just thanks, Marcus. I mean, it was it was great to get the invite, and it's been fantastic spending a good hour and a half with you. It's yeah, there's, like you said, we've all got a little bit more time on our hands, so whether it's 6 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock in the morning, it's always fun for me to talk whiskey. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it and enjoyed being with you.
Look, talking whiskey is something we all enjoy, and I thank you so much for coming on, because having you on has been absolutely fantastic. All of our guests are fantastic, but you, Andy Watts, are just that little bit more fantastic than the rest. Don't tell them I said that. But it has been great to hear from you and great to have you on. When this finishes, when we get back to a sense of normality, if we do, let all of us know if you are in the UK, because I'm sure there are so many people who would love to meet you at a bar and buy you a drink and just have a chat with you about literally anything. But from us here on Malts with Mates, to everyone who's watching, thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you to Andy for coming on and for joining us. I've been Some Whiskey Bloke, joined today by my guest, Andy Watts, who's been absolutely amazing. And we hope to see you next time, guys. See you around.
Thanks, Marcus. Thank you.
Bye. It always does take a little bit of time to actually finish the broadcast. So we're just kind of waiting for this.